And let's get into this great show here today. What's our Fraud Watch Network? Well, we're all about helping communities avoid frauds and scams through information, education, special events like this one, and other resources. Now, thanks for joining us here for the first of our series this month. This month is very special because it's Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and the big emphasis is on online safety. So we're definitely going to go into that. As I said, my name's John Young, volunteer fraud fighter. What do I do? Well, I teach anti-fraud classes to older adults, and I'd also like to talk to you about so many things that we've been doing. And this is an interactive conversation. Let me emphasize interactive. So I hope you'll join the conversation, share your comments, your experiences, thoughts, and questions. And you can do that in our comments section of the chat or by raising your hand. There's a feature for that too, because we really look forward to hearing from you and answering your questions. But first, let me set the stage for you for our conversation. And it's really sad, but the reality is that for many of us, our lives are increasingly lived online, where these hackers and scammers are lurking. We connect with family and friends on social media, we work online, we play games online, we shop online for everything from coffee to coffee creamers to cars. And a lot of us do much, if not all, of our financial transactions like online banking, and that exposes us to these online predators. At the same time, we're constantly hearing of one major corporate data breach after another in which our own personal and sensitive information has been compromised. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what we can do to stay safe online. A little background on me. I worked at IBM for many years, 20 plus, in the cloud division as a cybersecurity expert. And I'm really happy because I'm going to partner up today with Dave Marrow. And Dave has over 35 years experience in cybersecurity, investigations, and incident response. He also has a wide-ranging military career because he served for 12 years as a special agent for the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and he specialized in computer-related crime. Now, Dave's also headed cyber incident response and threat intelligence for major U.S. banks, and we'll talk about threat intelligence in a moment. Dave also has testified on cybersecurity issues before Congress, and he served as an expert witness in court numerous times. So Dave, I want to say welcome, and I'm very excited to be talking with you here today.
I'm glad to be here, John. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, you're going to be a great resource for us. And what are you going to share with us today on cybersecurity and online cyber safety?
Well, I've got a couple of topics I want to talk about, John. The first is I want to talk about some of the top scams that have been affecting seniors in 2022. Now, this comes from the Federal Trade Commission, and these are just basically categories of scams that have been reported to the FTC. Now, the FTC realizes that they get reporting on only about 5 or 10% of the scams that actually happen, but this gives us a feel for what's going on in scams and fraud against seniors in 2022. The biggest one that's out there is a category of imposter scams, where people call you up or appear on your computer screen or text you and say they're somebody they're not. They will say they're from Amazon and you've got a package coming, or they'll say they're from the IRS, or they'll say they're from some other government agency, and they want you to do something. It's almost always after one of two things: your personal information or money. So the imposter scams are some of the most pervasive things, and that category affects a lot of the things we deal with. There's also what we call in the category of tech support scams, which is where people will be sitting at their computer and a pop-up will come and say, "Hey, your computer is full of malware. Call this number, or click on this link, and you'll be connected with a security expert." And so people will say, "Oh my God, there's something in my computer," and so they'll click on it, and they'll be connected with somebody who purports to be from Microsoft or one of the security companies, but in reality is a hacker, and they'll proceed to try to either get on your computer or get you to give them your personal information. Some of the other things that are out there that are scams that affect our older adults, sweepstakes and lottery scams. Even though you may not have ever entered it, you may get an email or a text saying, "Hey, this is a great grant going on. All you got to do is apply," and in reality, there is no grant. Or you'll get the modern version of the old scam where the fake Nigerian prince or whatever calls you or used to fax you or email or mail you and say, "I've got $1 million. All you got to do is pay taxes on it." That's always a scam. There's the things we're going to see. One of the things we're going to see a lot of in the future, in the next few months, is going to be online shopping scams. And this is probably like where I live in the South, in our state, this is the number one scam that our residents see. And that's where you order something and it never arrives, or you're shopping for something and you order it and it doesn't. It's not at all what you ordered, but you can't ever get a hold of the people to give it back to them, or you can't get a refund. That happens, obviously, as you would believe, very much more often toward holidays, especially Christmas time. We always deal with government imposters and friends or relative scams. Romance scams is a big one, and we'll talk about that probably in a little while. And imposter scams of government officials. The sheriff calling you up and saying you missed jury duty, but if you give him gift cards, he'll take care of it. That kind of thing. And everybody always talks about robocalls. Everybody has a problem with robocalls. It's probably the biggest gripe I hear from people is phone calls and texts and scam things that they can't control. Now, there's some new things we're seeing in these worlds. Imposter scams appear to be evolving, because they appear to be changing format and getting a lot more complex. Used to be you just get a guy on there and he'd try to tell you he was from Microsoft or from Amazon or whatever. Now you may get 2 or 3 layers of people being his boss, maybe a customer service person. All of this is trying to make it sound more and more believable. And we're seeing also evolving ways of paying. Cryptocurrency is one of the biggest scam categories that's rising now, both in scams of trying to get you to invest in it, and then you find out you've invested in a bogus cryptocurrency market, or it's using crypto as payment, because crypto, like gift cards, is very hard to trace and provides a whole lot of anonymity and safety to the scammers. We've got a lot more coming up in deep fake and AI scams, where what we call the deep fake. I'm sure a lot of people have heard about that, where people who appear to be, now in the celebrity imposter scams, for example, you might get a phone call that sounds like, maybe you could make it sound like the celebrity that says, "Hey, I want you to come help me, blah, blah, blah. I need money for my charity," whatever. But now with the AI, the automated intelligence, we have a lot more believable voices. And we even have there's one that I just saw the other day where Tom Hanks had basically gone on Twitter and said, there's somebody trying to sell something out there that's not me. And it's basically a very good fake. Tom Hanks appears to be pushing a product that is not him at all. Again, online shopping is changing. It's going to be a bigger thing we see every year coming in around Christmas. And just like, the old days, now Christmas has started down here in the South. I was in Walmart the other day, and there all the Christmas decorations are out. So it starts earlier year after year, and the scammers start earlier year after year also. And then robocalls again are getting very good at using AI to improve their imposter voices and improve the believability of what they're doing. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is a couple of steps of how you stay safe online. There's a bunch of things you need to do to stay safe online. There is no one silver bullet. But first of all is you need to be really, really careful when you allow somebody else to have access to your computer, especially what we call remote access. And that is, for example, if somebody calls you and says they're from Microsoft and you've got viruses in your computer and they need you to download this handy little program to allow them to help you fix something. And if you download their handy little program, they'll make you believe that whatever they want you to believe because they take charge of your computer. So unless you have initiated that and know what's going to happen, don't allow anybody access to your computer. If you need sadly, some of the computer stores and repair facilities try to do remote access to do certain things legitimately. You call them up because your computer's acting up and you're talking to them, but they'll try to do some remote access things to you before you bring the computer into the store. If that happens, make sure you know who you're calling, and just make sure if anything at all makes you feel uncomfortable, stop the program, turn your computer off, and take it into the store. Using strong passwords has always been the thing we talk about in cybersecurity, and everybody's heard it. Random characters, 8 to 12 characters, upper, lowercase, all those things. But now everybody says, hey, I can't remember 8,000 passwords that I have. So we talk about having password managers, programs that help you keep those random passwords, helps you generate those and make sure you don't reuse those passwords. So you use the same password for your bank as you use for, CNN or wherever you get your news, and 4 or 5 other places. And if one of those gets compromised, they also have the password to your bank. There's also, because passwords are so old, passwords have been around a long time. They've gotten kind of aged, right? We all kind of slow down and get a little less effective in some ways as we get older, and passwords are no different. So the security community has introduced another layer of security in addition to passwords, and that's what we call multi-factor authentication. And you probably use that already. If you try to sign on to your bank or sign on someplace and you've put in the user ID and the password, then they want to send you a text to your mobile device that says, six numbers, 6 random numbers, and you're supposed to type it into the keyboard. That's a multi-factor. It's something that augments the password to make it a little less likely that a hacker has guessed your password, or you have somehow lost it, or he has been able to compromise it in some way. So wherever you see those things available, please use those. Update your software a lot. Automatic updates available on most of the major software packages. You need to have that set on everything you have. And if you don't know how to do it, ask somebody how to set it up so it'll automatically update when a new piece of software is released. And finally, learn how to recognize and report phishing. Now, we all know what phishing looks like. We know what spam or SMS fraud, smishing is what it's called, looks like. But you need to understand how to report that and who to report that to. And we can talk about that in a little bit also. And that's it, John.
Well, thanks a lot, Dave. That's a ton of information. So, but the beautiful thing is, I know a lot of the folks that are participating today, their heads probably swimming because it's just such an overload of information. But the beautiful thing is, we could take our time here. We got plenty of time to back up and actually go through some of the things that you talked about in more detail. And that'll really help people understand what's going on. Like one thing I thought right away that jumped out at me is multi-factor authentication, MFA. It sounds so scary,
Yeah.
but really the most common form of multi-factor authentication is really just two-factor authentication. And most of us have had that happen where we'll try to get into our online bank and it'll send us a text over our phone just to put in that code. Or it can go to email. It just depends how people set that up. So, Dave, I wanted to kind of talk to you about some of these situations before we throw it to the audience for their questions. Maybe you can answer a few of these questions
Sure.
before we go into them. And I can answer some myself because you were talking about deep fakes and AI and all of that. That happens to be one of my specialties is AI and voice cloning. So I think based on experience from teaching the anti-fraud classes, when the students come up to me, what they tell me the most is that they're getting calls that their grandson is in jail, and it sounds just like their grandson, or their little granddaughter's been kidnapped, and it sounds just like their little granddaughter.
Right.
So I don't think so much yet that the technology is there to show Tom Hanks' face or someone else's face that well. It could fool some people, especially if your eyesight isn't that great. But I think right now the overwhelming thing to worry about is these AI voice scams because they're really on the rise. And I just saw some FTC stats that we're running into the billions of dollars now on those. And one of the questions I'd like to ask you is, you had mentioned that we're only at the tip of the iceberg with reported scams. Should people, first of all, say, I know where they should report them to. It's the ftc.gov. Okay. We always talk about that in our classes, but the question for you is, should people report unsuccessful scam attempts also and maybe give a big picture or just hang up and say, forget about it?
Well, both. I mean, if you have an unsuccess, I mean, if somebody calls you or somebody texts you or whatever, and you say, this is obviously a fake. And first of all is don't engage them. Don't talk to them. Just hang up on them. Now you can still report that. You can report it to the FTC, or if it comes in on email or a text message, you can report it to the FTC and a group called the FBI's IC3, the Internet Complaint Center. And basically what that is a gathering where you report it, just like doing a police report. C3I is basically an organization put together and run by the FBI, but all law enforcement uses it. And so if you get these types of things, even if you hang up on them, even if you want to ditch the email or whatever, report it, because that helps us get a good idea of what's going on. IC3 does a great job at making information available to investigators around the world, but especially in the US. And the way we catch these guys is to have a bunch of reports, and it's kind of like putting a jigsaw puzzle together. You know, you get a piece of this one and a piece out of that one, and suddenly you have a picture of where this person is or where this group is operating out of.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes you one step closer to being able to catch them. So I suggest even if you thwart an incident, go ahead and report it.
I had a question. What did you testify to Congress about? I found that fascinating.
Well, I've done it a couple of times. I was the head of cybersecurity and physical security for a tech company called EDS, Electronic Data Systems, and I was their head of security, and I testified about cybersecurity and breach responses, because I did most of the breach responses. We had 5,000 different companies that we provided services to. And the breach responses that we did was for our customers. And so I ran a lot of those. And so I talked about what make breach responses good, and why it was so hard to do a really good, and this was several years ago, it was really hard to do a breach response that reaches out and catches everybody in just a day, in a few hours. It's almost impossible to figure out what's happened and then realize who's been involved. And I also
Can
testify
you
a little bit.
briefly, oh, sorry. I'm
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I didn't mean to, I was going to say, can you briefly explain what a breach is? A data breach?
Yeah. A data breach is basically, it's the industry term for when data is compromised. Usually it's when a hacker or a group of hackers is able to get into your network as a company. Now you can have a data breach personally also, but most people don't deal with those the same way. But all these companies and the government and NGOs and everybody gathers data on us. It may just be our social security number. It may be our credit card numbers. Healthcare is a big place for data breaches too. And basically, the hackers go after that information because they can sell it on the internet. And so, a data breach is basically that situation where a company discovers that there's a hacker in their network, or has been in their network, or their data appears somewhere online, and they realize that the data that they were responsible for keeping safe has been taken.
And that affects everybody on this call, because if a company gets hacked, like Equifax, a lot of times they'll say, well, that's Equifax, it has nothing to do with me. Well, it does, because our information is stored by Equifax. For example, 146 million records were stolen in the Equifax breach of 2016, and there's only 115 million actual full-time workers in the United States. So 146 million records were stolen, and that's more than the entire workforce. So that shows you a lot of people that were retired or part-time people also were affected. So corporate data breaches affect every single person. Now, one of the things we didn't touch on, and I've seen a lot of this in my classes, Dave, is, and this affects our audience in particular, our audience may be retired, but a lot of them want to work part-time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's scams online for getting a part-time job. And they ask people to fill out the application and ask for the social security number on the application. And do you have anything you want to talk about with that? Have you seen that a lot?
Well, yeah, we see a lot of that, especially coming out of the pandemic. There was a lot of that, and during the pandemic, when a lot of people were doing this, moving away from face-to-face meetings and interviews, and moving into remote Zoom or whatever they were using. There was a lot of instances where folks would call in to the help center, the helpline where I work 3 days a week as a volunteer, and talk about, hey, I talked to somebody who said they were going to give me a job, and they took all my information and I never heard from them again. Or there's a variation of that, which is you talk to somebody who says they'll give you a job, and it's in logistics. And what they do is they'll say, hey, I'll send you a check every now and then. You take that check, take 10% off for your fee, and go to the bank and cash it, or put it into a checking account that you've established, and write me a check for it and send it back. Well, what happens is the check they give you is either counterfeit or stolen. So you go to the bank and cash it. The bank gets your information, and when the check bounces, it comes back to the bank. Then they call you and say, hey, you're on the hook for this. And then so you've sent the money to the fraudster, and you're on the hook for the amount of the check. So there's a couple of variations. None of these things are just one trick ponies. These guys take this and vary it quite often because they're endlessly inventive. And some of them aren't very smart. Some of them are really smart, but they're endlessly inventive about changing their types of scams either to be more effective. When one stops being effective, they'll make it more effective, or to figure out a new way to get victims to do what they want them to do.
Yeah, they're masters at psychology because they do the same thing over and over and over again. Okay,
Yeah.
guys like you and guys like me, we've got to be versed in every kind of scam. But these guys just learn one thing, and there's almost an unlimited amount of people that they can try to pull these scams. I'll throw in there real quick before we take audience questions because they're pouring in right now.
Yeah, I see
And
a
I'm going to
bunch
kick
of
it
them in
over
the
to
chat.
Strat. Yeah. What I wanted to say for people that are filling out job applications, don't put in your social security number because that's optional. There's no requirement to do that. That's the main way to avoid having your social security number stolen in that particular scam is just don't fill it out. And any job that wants you to do that isn't worth having anyway. Okay, because first of all, 99% of them aren't legitimate. They only need that when they're onboarding the person.
Yeah.
And onboarding means to hire them. So since a large amount of our audience does like to do part-time work, guard that social security number and never, ever put it into an application if anyone asks. So right now I'm going to ask Strat to basically help us take a few questions from our audience. Strat?
Thank you, John, and thank you, Dave. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to invite Laura to take herself off mute. I think it's Laura Cleary who has a question about avoiding multiple calls, avoiding robocalls, so to speak. So, Laura, are you with us? You care to ask your question?
Yes, I am. Can you
Please
hear
go
me?
ahead.
Hi, Laura. Yep. Hi, Laura.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Actually, I have a couple of questions here, but the one that's bugging me the most right now is I keep getting repeat calls from a very obviously computer-generated a caller, and he's got a Russian accent. He's trying to sell me a car. I mean, I bought a car 2 years ago, so I'm not real nuts about the fact that they're tracking that information. And I blocked the call. This is on my cell phone, but I keep getting them. So, and it seems to be the same number. So I don't know how it's working.
Well, there's a couple of things. Obviously, it sounds like you've already blocked the call on the instrument, on the device, actually gone to the call itself and basically says block future calls. There's a few other things you can try. One is to get yourself, now this is on your wireless device, right? This is your cell phone.
Yeah, my cell phone. Yeah.
Okay. So there's various robo fighting software that's available out there, and there's one called Nomo Robo. There's another one called Robo Killer, and they're pretty cheap. They're like $5 a month, and if you get one of those and load it onto your phone, what it'll do is it'll compare the number as it comes in to a known database of known scammers, and then if it'll block it a lot of times. Now, one of the things everybody needs to understand is there is no silver bullet. What we talk about in cybersecurity is layers of protection. So that one of those programs is one layer. It does some automatic work. And also depending on what carrier you have, Verizon, T-Mobile, those guys, they offer for about $5 a month added to your bill, a piece of software that you can have also screen your calls, and they both work together. I have 2 of them on my phone at any given time. So you can do that, but that's only one layer. That's the automated layer. The other layer is just keep hanging up. Don't engage. Try to block it on your phone. And the third layer is trying to get on the do not call list. And most people will scoff at that, but the do not call, a certain percentage of the do not call and do not text things we get are legitimate because there are rules that say they can, or they can do that. So try to use that also. Again, it's a layered approach, like an onion. Okay.
Doesn't seem to make a difference.
Well, no, I mean, and the other thing is basically just look and have a voicemail ready that, you make sure your voicemail box is working, and check out your caller ID. And if you don't recognize it as
Yeah.
a known caller, just don't answer it. Send it direct to voicemail, because most
Yeah.
times these guys will never leave you a voicemail. And the thing about these types of guys is the scammers are on a quota. Usually they're a part of a group. They all are in a hierarchy type thing, and these are the kind of the street dealers of that hierarchy. So they have a
Uh-huh.
quota that their bosses want them to get. $1,000 a week, bring it into the organization or whatever. And if they're trying to get you, and you just keep stiff arming them and hanging up on them and stuff, pretty soon they'll get tired, because they'll realize they're not going to make any money off of you, and move on to another victim. Because they're, they basically, they're not going to waste time with somebody they know is very unlikely to give them any money.
Yeah, that's a good
So,
point, Dave. The best way to avoid a lot of these calls is let unknown or block calls, even if they're from your area code, go to voicemail. And that'll clear up 90-something% of your problem. Our generation, we grew up, there was no answering machines, no voicemail, nothing like that. You either picked up the phone or it rang 30 times. So that was a real problem. Now, my students, some of them are aware of this, some of them aren't, but there's a national do not call registry that actually will block the legitimate vendors. There's nothing against the vendor calling you that's illegal, because if you donate it to a charity, they're allowed to sell your information to other charities. So businesses actually sell information to other businesses. It's not something that feels good, but it's not illegal. So I'll give you the information on the do not call registry. It's do not call.gov is where you go. Do not call.gov. And that'll take you to their homepage. And that's the FTC, for Federal Trade Commission. And what happens there is you just put in your phone number. You put up to 3. And I've done it for my parents. And it was almost a miracle. They were going crazy with all of the calls that we're getting. And once I did that, almost all of them cleared up, because my mom liked to donate to all these different charities. And before she knew it, she was getting one after another after another. So do not call.gov. Strat just put that in the chat for people to look at. Thank you, Laura. We're going to move on to another call.
Could I ask one more
Appreciate your
related question? What is a
Uh,
VPN? What is a VPN? That they're always trying to sell me that. Does that work?
Yeah, but Dave, if you want to answer, it's virtual private
Sure.
network. Dave can jump on
Yeah.
that real quick.
Well, a VPN is a piece of software that establishes an encrypted, we call it a tunnel in cybersecurity. It's basically an encrypted connection between your device, your phone or your computer, and the other end where what you're connected to, whether that's a website or an application or whatever. And the reason you do that is if you're sitting in Starbucks or a hotel lobby or the airport, and you're on public Wi-Fi, if you don't do anything, that connection, that wireless connection, is unencrypted. So, and it's possible, and there have been a lot of examples of people sitting there next to you or in the same general area, and with very cheap equipment, being able to piggyback on that signal and read what you're doing. That's why you hear us talk about never do your personal financials, your bank, whatever, when you're sitting in a coffee shop. Never do it when you're on public Wi-Fi anywhere, because unless you encrypt the signal from your laptop or your phone to the Wi-Fi and then out, it's anybody can read it. So a VPN is a piece of software that creates that encrypted channel.
Okay.
And if you're on a VPN, it's very hard for them to break into that discussion, that two-way discussion between you and the other end. And even if they do, there's an encryption algorithm that scrambled all the data. So,
yeah, that's a great point, Dave. I'll jump on there and add a little something else. In simple terms, when you have a VPN, it hides you from other bad actors, as we would call them. So say you're at Starbucks, like Dave said, well, say there's 10 people that are using that Wi-Fi. They'll be able to see the information of 9 of them, but they won't see yours because it'll be hidden. Your address will be hidden, and any information you'll be sending will be hidden. As he said, it's almost like you're in a tunnel that's protecting you, whereas everybody else is standing out there in a wide open field. So that's a great question, Laura.
Is that
Thank you
something
so
that
much.
do you recommend it for anybody?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. I'd recommend it. Don't get a free one because then you
Yeah.
would possibly be getting a scammer that's pretending
Right.
to be a VPN, and they're just using it to get ransomware downloaded to your computer or getting information from your phone. I would go with a really well-known one. You can do your research. I really don't sponsor any, and I'm not sponsored by any, but there's a few. I would actually get a suite of products because that way you don't get antivirus from one, which I recommend for anyone. That is cybersecurity 101. Is all these things we're hearing about ransomware and malicious software. Well, the antivirus helps with that a lot. And second is the VPN is another thing. And they also have a thing called dark web monitoring. So I would get a package that is from a legitimate vendor. And I don't want to say any names because I don't think that's
Yeah,
correct for me to
I'll
do.
tell you-
But
good point
I
there. You know, unfortunately, we as AARP, we can't recommend, suggest one vendor over another. But, you know, that brings us to our next question. And I'm going to invite Penny Pearson to take herself off mute because she has a question about password manager, something you both touched on a little bit earlier. So, Penny, please ask your question.
Thank you. I had asked about recommendations or at least perhaps reports on password managers. I've used them for several years and I understand a reluctance not to recommend one over the other. But I kind of have this thought and feeling that if my particular password manager was hacked, then all of a sudden they've got even more security because they're trying to save their customer base. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, it wouldn't happen again. But my particular password manager has a 12 to 18 character minimum. And when it generates these passwords, there's no way on this planet that I will ever remember them. So it's the way for me to be able to get through multiple, you know, logins on either my phone or on my computer. And, you know, of course, if you forget your master password, you're toast. But I've really appreciated that ability to create extremely complex passwords. But I'm seeing more and more of these password managers reporting out that they've been hacked and that some personal data has been captured. So I'm just curious if I know the AARP will not necessarily recommend one over the other, but maybe there's an agency like you just, you know, gave Do Not Call or someone else that does the reporting on maybe the stability and or transparency of these companies and how they've been affected.
Yeah, what you want to look for is product reviews online. Now, one of the ones that I recommend is PC Magazine, pcmag.org or pcmag.com, excuse me. If you just go to PC Magazine, in case you don't know, is basically a computer geeks magazine. It's those of us who, you know, live and breathe computers forever, and it's for the home office. And they have a lab that they do all kinds of different product reviews, including security software and word processing and hardware and software. And you go there and look at the reviews, and what their reviews do is every year, for example, they have a password manager review. And what they do is they look at the top 10 or 12, they rate them. And CNET does this too. Somebody said that CNET does that too. They rate them, and then they give you the pros and the cons, you know, of any of these pieces of software, antivirus or password manager. And then I tell people, you know, go look, decide how you, because they all work a little different. And you're right. I think I used the same one you used, you're talking about. because they've been around a long time and I've been using them a long time. And there's steps you can take when something like that happens, and they'll come forward. And I tend to believe the same philosophy you have. When I worked in the software industry, we never got hacked, thank goodness. But if we had, that would have caused a seismic event in our company, and we would have basically, my budget would have gone from $100,000 a year to $1 million a year, like overnight, because of that. So, but PC Mag is a good one. CNET's a good one. One of these that does reviews, because they will give you reputable ones. And John's right. You got to be really careful when you go online and just Google password managers or VPNs, because the scammers can buy ads that makes and do what's called search engine optimization, that makes their results appear at the top of your search results. And they know, as he said, these guys are masters at human nature, and they know people are lazy, right? They're going to get the results of a Google search or results of a Bing search, and they're going to take the first one or two in the list. They're not going to go 3 pages down. And so this, through paying the operators of the search, Google or Bing or whoever, and doing this search engine optimization techniques, they can get their results to appear at the top of the list, and then they get more and more people to do them. That's why we tell people, not only don't Google for VPNs and antivirus, but if you got to call customer service at Microsoft, or if you got to call customer service at your bank, go to the website. Get customer service off of the bank's website. Don't just Google it, because you're more liable than not to get a scammer these days off of those results like that. I'm sorry. I went on a little rampage there.
No, I think it's important.
That's a great point. Great point, Dave. I'd also say to everybody, don't Google top 5 VPNs or top 5 antivirus, because what will happen is these are fake sites. When you put in top 5 antivirus review, it's so easy to get a domain or a website. You could do that. I could do that in half an hour and set that up, basically. And then they'll set up, stuff that'll be to fake sites and stuff that will be able to actually work against you. So another good thing I would say is look up at Amazon. I always like to look at Amazon. If it only has 3 or 4 reviews, that's bad. But if something sold 10,000 copies and has 4.7 stars, then you know that the company hasn't flooded it with fake reviews, right? And pushed up the numbers. So I would say you can just put in VPN on Amazon, VPN software, it'll come up with a bunch. Antivirus software, it'll come up with a bunch. And I would educate myself before I pull the trigger on anything, because there's a lot of pros and cons to any kind of software. And that's how I'd proceed, very systematically, step by step.
Wonderful. We have another
I have a question. I don't know the format, but can I ask a question?
Yes. Can you let Karen ask a question first, and then we'll come back to you, Daly, okay?
Of course.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Karen Foreman to ask a question about, Karen, are you still on? Hello, Karen? Take yourself off mute, please.
Oh, yes, she's there. What was my question? Sorry, what
Karen's
was my
question was about, something, John, that you've done a lot, in terms of recording somebody's voice when they answer the phone, yes, and then people being able to use it to authenticate. So, a little bit of the AI thing here happening. So, Karen, if you would like to elaborate on your question. Okay. Well, we'll come to.
She's at work, so what I'll do is I'll elaborate on Karen's question, and I'll do it very quickly. How do I do it? Okay, why am I considered an expert at it? Because I can go on TikTok, where a lot of our grandkids are, and they're just young kids, but they're making video after video. All I need is a minute of them talking without background music or any other sounds. As long as it's clean, I could take a recording of what they've done. Then what I do is I put it through this software that I have, which you can get free. I actually buy some that's a little higher high definition. Okay, and I think works better. But what I'll do is I'll write a little text script, and then I'll have the AI say what I want it to say in your granddaughter or grandson's exact voice. And you wouldn't be able to tell them apart. Your rest of your family couldn't tell them apart. Coworkers couldn't tell them apart. That's how good AI voice cloning has become these days. In fact, I was on CBS recently, and the reporters got confused. We had a segment where they had to figure out which was the real reporter and which was the AI clone voice, and they were wrong. They couldn't figure it out. So it ended up in total confusion. That's how close it could be. That's why I say let it unknown calls go to voicemail. And then if you get a call where you have a frantic grandchild screaming, or they're in jail, or they ran out of money, push back, okay? If the kidnapper or someone else says, don't call your family, first thing you do is call your family when you get off the phone, but also ask questions. The more questions you ask, the more you're going to realize that it's a scam, okay? Because kidnappings and people going to jail, all that hasn't gone up into the stratosphere statistically, but these AI fake calls have. So all I have to do is take a video, take the audio, and from there I can make it sound like your grandchild is saying anything I want them to say. And it can get very scary. It can sound frantic and desperate.
John, I also think one of the things she was asking about earlier was the old the old advice we used to give people of don't answer the phone if somebody says, "Is this John?" or "Is this Sally?" and it is, say yes. Don't say yes, because they were using that to answer questions for the authentication, for changing passwords and things like that. And I've given that advice too. You know, if they call up and the first thing that the person says is this Mrs. Smith? And if you say no, or if you say yes, you know, they could be video or taping your recording your voice and playing that voice back if they go and, you know, want to make a charge, and the call center operator says, you know, do you agree to this? And they flip on it and say yes in your voice. That way, if you go and challenge it later, it's in your voice saying yes. I haven't, to tell you the truth, I always thought that was kind of an urban legend. Excuse me, because I mean, I've been working with the AARP call center for 3 years. I've taken, you know, dozens of calls a day, and I've never run across anybody where that actually happened. Have you ever heard of that actually happening in the wild, or is that just one of those things that somebody said and his friend repeated?
The yes thing? I've never heard the yes thing as far as that goes, but almost every person in my anti-fraud class has said that they have received some kind of AI scam where a kid was taken from school or kidnapped or broken down, and they either had that happen to themselves or they knew someone. So maybe it still is an urban legend. I don't know. But Dave, we are running short on time. I think we had one more question we could take, Strat. Daleen was her name?
Yes, please go ahead. You're on mute.
Hi, my name's Dale. I can chip and Dale.
Okay.
Hi.
My question is about the Apple atmosphere. I, for the past 9 years, have been teaching an iPhone class to older adults. So I try to make things as simple as possible. And I have all of them use Keychain to keep track of all their passwords. And it seems to be very successful. Do you have any negative comments about Keychain?
Well, yeah, I have concerns. That's one of the big controversies in the security community, is whether in browser, like Google has a keychain, Apple has a keychain, if those things that store on your system are as safe as a dedicated piece of software. Because especially the browsers, you know, whether that's Safari or Chrome or any browser that has a keychain attached in it, the thinking goes, and I tend to agree with it, is that if one of the things that the browser community and engineers do is they try to make the user experience easy, and getting through security is one of the biggest user complaints in the entire world. And so the idea is that there's a lot of nooks and crannies of vulnerability in most keychain software on browsers that they can exploit. And so, I mean, they're all very good about trying to make them secure, but I tend, as an old school guy, I tend to go to, give me a password manager, right? Give me a computer program or an application that somebody has dedicated their company to making this thing as secure as it possibly can. And yeah, they want to make it easy to use, but the security thing is their prime concern. And you can't necessarily, I don't think, say that about the browser browser type keychains or the system, the iOS type keychain, because they're trying to balance usability. They're trying to balance the ease of folks dealing with security and making it understandable and integrating it into the iOS operating system or into the Android operating system. They're trying to take care of all those things, and you can't do all of them well, right?
And
Yeah.
yet password
Let me,
managers.
Dale, let me quickly, we're running out of
Okay.
time, so let me quickly tell you why I think it's bad. Okay? Cell phone robberies are on the rise where they're actually being grabbed from someone. The person goes around the block and changes the password. What they've done is they've recorded a person putting in their passwords, and they've taken it. And by that point, once they change the password, the actual owner of the phone is stuck. Okay. But on top of that, if your phone is stolen and you have the password so that you fly right through into any application or online banking, right? Then it doesn't matter. They will be able to go right into the application. They'll do the two-factor authentication to that phone, and they're going to be able to put in the code, and they'll be able to do their worst. Okay, I'll just leave that to the imagination. But that's why I advise everybody never to go for the convenience. I don't do it, of keeping passwords in my browser. I rather put in the password every single time. The second thing is never use the same password on every account. That's basic,
Sure.
but I get that question a lot. You're a teacher, you teach about it, but I get that question all the time. Is it bad to use the same password on multiple accounts? But thank you, Dale. I'm going to say, Dave, this was an amazing conversation. I think our audience will find it super helpful as they go on. Thanks for your time. I know you're really busy. Thank you for your service as an AARP helpline representative. You help people, as you said, 3 times a week. I also wanted to let people know really quickly about the upcoming cyber safety chats that Dave and I are going to do this month, Cybersecurity Awareness Month, with an emphasis on online safety. Next Monday, October 16th at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, we're going to do crypto scams, cryptocurrency. Then the week after that, October 23rd at the same time, and they're all at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 Pacific. We're going to call that one Turning the Tables on Scammers. The last thing is AI, artificial intelligence scams, on Monday, October 30th at the same time. And you could register for the upcoming cyber safety chats at the same link that you had before. It's too long to read out right there. Strat pulled it up. Thank you, Strat. So everyone can pull that up. But Strat has done a great job, as always, keeping this going. There are some of our key resources, too many to mention, but if you go to aarp.org/California, you'll be able to get to all of these. If you just go to aarp.org, you can go to the money section. There's a menu on top, and it'll have frauds and scams that you can look at. So I hope everybody had as good a time as I did. Dave, once again, thank you for all your expert advice.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you.
You're welcome.